Beavis and Butthead are debuting on MTV, Jurassic Park is heading to theaters, and Bill Clinton is being inaugurated as the 42nd President of the United States. But perhaps you weren't paying attention to any of that and were instead firing up your Amiga for another point-and-click adventure. Amongst classics such as the Monkey Island series was a curious little title, Simon the Sorcerer, developed and published by AdventureSoft. Gamers would control Simon, a young boy sent into a magical universe unlike any other on a quest to become an almighty wizard and stop a nasty sorcerer. Heavily influenced by the Discworld franchise, the game poked fun at many classic fantasy storylines while implementing genre staples such as verbal commands, item collecting through pixel hunting, and some very unorthodox puzzle solving. Critically, Simon the Sorcerer was well received and a massive success, managing to sell a staggering 600,000 copies. That may not seem like a lot in today's insane video game market, but back then it was an incredible accomplishment. With its success, a sequel was created that earned equal praise and sales, which led to a 3D game, Simon the Sorcerer 3D to be precise, and it was critically panned. It was a troubled project, with the series creator later stating that the move to 3D, one made under the pressure of a changing market, was ultimately a mistake. Despite the failure of Simon the Sorcerer 3D, the series wasn't quite done yet. Silver Style Entertainment would step in for a fourth, somewhat improved entry created mostly for a German market. A fifth game was also made by Silver Style Entertainment, which is apparently pretty tricky to track down these days, and that was more or less the end of that, outside of a failed attempt at a sixth game from an Irish company. Gosh, I didn't even touch on the pinball game and a bizarre puzzle game that was also released. So yes, as you can see, this series has some serious history behind it, though the consensus seems to be that the franchise was never able to capture the same magic found in the original release. But that is the past, and now, many years later, it's time for Simon's grand return. Though Simon the Sorcerer Origins is actually a prequel to the original game. With the blessing of series creators Simon and Michael, Small Things Studios are hoping to uncork some of that 30-year-old magic that's been bottled up. But did Simon the Sorcerer Origins pull a rabbit out of its hat, or is this series out of tricks? Well, let's find out in our full review. But real quick, you know what's magical? Supporting indie visibility. Head over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames and you'll gain Discord access to the greatest indie gaming community. Enjoy early ad-free shows, get a shout out at the end of every video we produce, our podcast 3 days early, and so much more. But best of all, you're supporting indie visibility. Simon the Sorcerer Origins opens on our titular character living out the ordinary life of a teenager. An argument breaks out between his parents during a car ride, leading Simon to turn to his cassette player, which supplies his eardrums with the sweet sounds of Rick Astley's Together Forever. The family would appear to be moving into a new home, and then suddenly, while attempting to unlock a door within that home, Simon is sucked into a magical portal that leads him to a strange new fantasy realm. From here, Simon finds himself, unsurprisingly, on a magical quest to try to find his way back home. The story and presentation of Simon the Sorcerer Origins are by far its strongest aspects. The gorgeous hand-drawn visuals will draw you into its beautiful world, with the jaw-dropping animations and painstakingly detailed backdrops. It's a beautiful game that truly feels magical to gaze upon. This wonderful art direction is further brought to life by a phenomenal voice cast.
You've piqued my curiosity.
Our lead character sounds great, but so do the support characters, who all deliver their lines with humor and conviction. Toss in a stirring, whimsical soundtrack composed by Mason Fisher, who's composed such classics as Eye of the Beholder 3 and worked on the Fear franchise, and you've got yourself a stunning visual and audio presentation that is top-notch for the point-and-click genre. While Simon the Sorcerer Origins does a great job of capturing the look and feel of the series' best moments, it sadly counters those positives by also featuring a great deal of what frustrates players about this genre. The pointing and clicking isn't so bad, and in some ways has been brought up to modern times with a simple on-screen inventory system as opposed to a mess of verbs, but the puzzle design in spots is frustratingly obtuse. Now granted, you expect this in a point-and-click adventure, but in this particular title, the developers go a step too far into the past and in many cases showcase fundamentally flawed puzzle design. Before I delve too deep into what I strongly disliked about this game, let's discuss the basics. Movement is as simple as clicking about various locations to move Simon around, with a double click allowing him to run. I'd argue that the game could have defaulted to having our lead character run at all times, as there's rarely a reason to walk, but that's a relatively small complaint. I should also mention that players have the option of using a controller, but it's as clunky as you would expect and took me about 10 minutes of fiddling about before I switched to keyboard and mouse for good, a decision I don't regret and you probably won't either. Simon's inventory system is actually quite simple and well designed, allowing players to choose items freely and even combine them to solve certain puzzles by simply dragging them on top of one another. For those that aren't big on the old pixel hunting as they call it, any items of importance can be highlighted with the click of a button, a feature that can at least alleviate some degree of frustration. These few mechanics are more or less what you need to play outside of the patience of a saint to solve many of the game's infuriating puzzles. At first, one may be led to believe that Simon the Sorcerer Origins is going to be pretty easy as far as the point-and-click genre goes. The tutorial is well designed, you have a log to follow, and a fast travel system even attempts to speed up the process of getting between different locations. Things were going great for the first hour or so until some serious flaws began to show, mainly in some critically poor design choices that left me scratching my head. Now I'm all for a brain tickler, but there are puzzles in this game that are quite literally solved as they should be, but are so finicky that you don't get credit for doing so. Okay, so maybe I did try to brute force one or two of the game's conundrums, but I'm of the mind that brute force should work if the solution is ultimately the same, and that just isn't the case here. But what's worse is how the game seems to spit in your face at every corner. Oh, you solved that puzzle? Well, think again. You need the slightly different iteration of that very similar potion, which requires you to cast an asinine, batshit crazy combination of spells to create a new magical hat, which then magically transforms your old item into a new item. No, I'm not making that up. That's a real thing that happened in this game. And then you solved that puzzle? Well, haha, now you're immediately stuck again in the same damn location you felt trapped in for seemingly hours. And were you hoping for a hint system? Well, forget about it, unless you count a really grumpy old wizard all the way back at the beginning of the game who tells you much of nothing. God damn it, it was frustrating. At some point, the game begins to feel like it's intentionally padding its playtime, and in doing so, wasting the players. If you do happen to stumble into one of the game's absurd solutions, your only reward seems to be additional pain. It's a real kick in the nuts how annoying Simon's adventure can be, because you truly want to love this game, but it actively rejects you like that one love interest from high school you were never good enough for. I can deal with a point-and-click game being tough and a bit nonsensical in spots, but here it's been taken to the max level, and there was only so much I could take. The end result is a good 14 plus hours that feels more pain than pleasure. Of course, your skills or luck may vary with how many hours it takes you. Through my time spent with the game, I did only encounter one bug at the least where I couldn't exit a menu, but the game otherwise ran fine without any major issues to report. It's perfectly playable on Steam Deck too, looking vibrant and beautiful while also taking advantage of touchscreen controls. But in the end, it pains me to say that Simon the Sorcerer Origins just wasn't all that fun to play. I loved its humor, its art, and its soundtrack, but the puzzle design is so fundamentally flawed that it overshadows any positives. You're gonna end up really frustrated with this one. The point-and-click genre has come a long way, and we've seen some amazing newer releases bring this style of gameplay up to modern times successfully. Just look at this year's The Drifter, one of my favorite games of 2025. While I do believe the developers had their hearts in the right place, I think I would have preferred if Simon stayed in the past, if this is the kind of puzzle design we're gonna get in the present. At I Dream of Indie Games, we believe that games are so much more than a number. That's why we have our Genie Lamp tier system. You want to avoid that dreaded Indie Krampus all the way down there on the left, but we do go up to the elusive golden Genie Lamp of approval for those essential indie game releases. And with that, I'm going to have to award Simon the Sorcerer Origins the table lamp of approval. Just mediocre, unfortunately, but it should have been great.